Yeah. Oh no.
That wasn't the goal.
No, that wasn't the goal at all. I'm so sorry. All right. So, geez, we have a new different one today, and this was your pick.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I was super flat-footed last week when we got to the, okay, Jay, you're picking. It's like, oh, crap. Yeah, I get to do this once in a while, too.
You do get to do this.
So, yeah. So my pick, we're doing game media. I'm going to continue holding the thing up while you tell me not to hold the thing up.
It's okay. We're going to overlay it anyway.
I know.
I'm going to overlay a picture on top of the picture.
Can I awkwardly like angle it on the side? No, anyway. So I screwed up the audio enough that I probably shouldn't screw up the video too. So my pick for this week was The Precipice of Corruption, which is a 0-level Dungeon Crawl Classics funnel for anybody who knows Dungeon Crawl Classics by our friend. They're going to know today by our friend, author Nick Baran.
Say hi, Nick.
Hello.
And we are lucky enough to have Nick with us here today, virtually in the studio, which is why Jay and I are wearing headphones, to go through Dungeon Crawl Classic and The Precipice of Corruption as our piece of GRIMDARK game media for today, which is really exciting. So I think the most important thing here, because I am the newest to this party, is that you walk us through what is, before we get into Bon Voyage, what is Dungeon Crawl Classic and why was this such a jumping off point for a GRIMDARK style game?
Yeah, for sure. So Dungeon Crawl Classics, for anybody who doesn't know, this is a byproduct of Wizards of the Coast doing an open gaming license for Dungeons and Dragons and their D20 systems overall. So a brilliant company called Goodman Games published their take on it. So the rules themselves are derived from largely the 3.5 edition of D&D, stripped down in a lot of ways, thickened out in particularly around the spell casting and stuff like that, which is awesome.
Just to like give some context, I have 2 copies of this book. They are both phone books. Like they are thick boys when it comes to
don't get into violent arguments with people when you're playing this game, because you could clearly just beat somebody to death with that rule book.
It's weaponized.
But so it leans very much, when people talk about old school role playing, it leans very much into like an old school aesthetic and old school style. As we talked about, and you will be seeing shortly, an old school degree of lethality. And it kind of captures that gonzo spirit of early role-playing games. So one of the other things we kind of touched on is that, off camera previously, was that role-playing games have sort of diverged somewhere along the road. They've come to a fork in the road. And some of them have leaned more into role-playing and some of them have leaned more into games. This kind of goes back to having more mechanics to adjudicate, like, again, the spell casting and stuff like that. And it leans more on the ideas of adventure and exploration.
Yeah. Like cutting to the adventure part.
Cutting to the adventure part. Like you have backstory, you have setup. But again, if you think about, Nick was referencing earlier Indiana Jones. If you think about like an Indiana Jones movie, there's a MacGuffin, there's a thing, there's a reason that you're in the place doing the thing, but the experience is about getting from where you started to the thing. It's not about pages and pages of dialogue and, well, tell me who the king's ancestors were and who preceded them and who preceded them. The tomb has been abandoned for 100 years. Go into the tomb.
Yeah. And mechanically speaking, there's a lot less agency in Dungeon Crawl Classic because you're not so much creating a character, which is a very modern wargaming concept and kind of where wargaming evolved to. You're discovering who they are.
So again, this is a bit of a statement of intent in Dungeon Crawl Classics, because when you look at current iterations of Dungeons and Dragons, which is going to be the closest example in a modern version of a game, you're provided with this endless list of ways to create and generate your characters, which are largely designed so that players and game masters can manage what level they want their characters to be at and how they want those characters to feel and play.
Right.
Dungeon Crawl Classics, you can do all of that stuff, but the presumptive starting point is that you're creating random schmoes, 4 random schmoes usually, and you're placing them through the funnel, or as it usually turns out, as I mentioned before, a funnel that ends in a sluice,
it's a grinder,
to see who comes out the other end. Yeah. So it is. You're not a hero, and yet somehow it is a more traditional hero's journey, because you put 4 every person's into this thing, and the one you think might be coming out the other side as your protagonist might not be. They might be a stain on the floor somewhere 10 rooms back.
And that's the interesting thing for me as a new player, as a new person absorbing Dungeon Crawl Classic, and I've only absorbed it through Nick's adventures so far. It very much feels like the act structure of a horror movie where there's a final girl, right? And that was the compelling thing for me when we're thinking about this as a piece of grimdark media that's baked into the game.
Yes.
So where Dungeons and Dragons kind of diverts into everyone's house rules kind of being incorporated into the rule set over 5 editions, where it's like, no, you roll 4 dice and then you discard one and then you pick the highest, and you kind of start with a heroic character.
Yep.
Instead, in Dungeon Crawl Classic, and there's a great website we used called Purple Sorcerer, sorry, that will just generate you 4 schmoes, and you start with 4 random schmoes, and the final girl in the horror movie sense is the one that you probably end up, or maybe nobody.
And the one thing I can tell you, and Nick will probably back me up on this, is from years of playing Dungeon Crawl Classics, the one who will emerge as your main character is not the one you thought it was when you looked at your initial 4 characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever had the one you thought was going to turn out to be your main character, be the main character? Because I've not had that once.
Yes, but it's rare. Because what happens is people will push somebody forward because they're like, oh, this is the character that I want to be. And then inevitably throw them into danger. And that's what happens. But when people start to get hip to that, then they kind of will hold that character back and just use them for RP, and then throw the disposable characters forward before so that they can take it.
Is this a good time to have a moment of silence for the blacksmith?
It does feel like you spend people to get to the end of the story. So
you are in fact Fritz von Erich in this equation.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. You're spending people to try and get the belt. The strap does not come lightly to anyone. So I think that's the big differential for me absorbing this for the first time, Nick. And so I'd like to hear, before we set bon voyage into the boneyard, I want to hear, what was it that attracted you to DCC, that you started writing for it, and hear a bit about your story. So what was it about that mechanical difference and that old school black and white art that attracted you to write for it?
Okay, so there's a lot there. I took a 20-year hiatus from RPGs. I was busy with punk rock, and then working for Games Workshop, and then just alternating back and forth between punk and miniature gaming. And a point was reached where I was like, I kind of want to get back into RPGs. And I started dabbling with a bunch of different RPGs, and the aesthetic wasn't right. The level of heroism was too high. Like, it just didn't feel like D&D to me. Not what I remembered from first edition and a little bit of second edition D&D. And so I ended up hearing about Dungeon Crawl Classics through Free RPG Day. They had a free quick start guide that was available, and I had to work that day. And so I sent my partner at the time to, like, hey, can you go to the gaming store and grab this thing for me? Because I'm kind of curious about it. And the art and everything, there's something about black and white art that just feels grittier and more mysterious, where you're not placing yourself into the scene. You are imagining the scene in a much different way. At least that's how I take it.
In this house where we love fighting fantasy, that is truly a thing that Jay and I both share. Is we love all of that black and white line art from
let's all take a moment at the altar of Russ Nicholson.
Absolutely. And live inside the line drawings.
And it's like, because you just referenced Russ Nicholson, like, if you look in the Precipice of Corruption, like, the artists that I used in that, a lot of them are actually punk rock artists that were people that grew up on punk flyers and the Fiend Folio, and merge those two things into the style of how they started drawing art. And so that is like a huge thing.
It's funny how art and music did kind of overlap there for a point, didn't it? Especially with that music, like or the art, like the lowbrow stuff in punk in like the 70s and 80s, where it had that, like, it was pen and ink, then sometimes they'd ink it, and then sometimes the zine or the poster would just be that straight up, like, like line art that we see in all of these books. Like, they just started to blend together.
Yeah, no, there's a huge fusion of those two things, because when you think to the 80s, it's like so many of us grew up on D&D, Fangoria magazines, and punker metal.
Yeah.
And so all of those things were part of what made us who we are today. And so for a lot of punk artists, like the one guy I'm referencing, Mike Tommyrot, is a tattoo artist in Syracuse, and like when he is not doing tattoo art, he is doodling all sorts of like crazy Fangoria inspired just nonsense,
Yeah.
absolute
Monster stuff. Cool.
nonsense.
So
But
so then how did you land on DCC?
yeah, so I got the quick start guide and I started flipping through it and reading. When I read about the funnel and how you started out as a zero level character, and even when I played D&D, I preferred low level play. Like as soon as you get into raising the dead and wish spells and being able to do all these fantastical things, you lose me. And so starting at as a zero level peasant, and this idea that you are this, for lack of a better word, this completely disposable human being trying to eke out something for yourself, and survive to just live another day. That just resonated with me.
Right.
Um, and so, I ended up going through and noticing that spells, everything in DCC, if you roll a 1 on a D20, something bad happens.
Boy,
And
howdy
so
does it ever.
yeah, and so fumbles, spells, if you roll a 1, you can experience corruption or a misfire. There's so many different things in DCC that really lean into, like some people look at it as comedic value, but for me, it's like, oh, this is the misery, this is the darkness, this is the person running through the forest and tripping over every single root as the monster is chasing after them. That's the scene that plays in my head when I'm playing DCC.
Yeah, it's
And so
vibes.
yeah, it's all vibes.
It's funny because when Jay was describing Stennard as a setting, as a backdrop, and how this was kind of an introduction to it, the way that I kind of paralleled it to the audience when I was playing the game was, it reminds me of the movie The Witch, right? Where everything is this like drowned out sepia, the crops are all rotting. There's a town, but good things don't happen there either. You know what I mean? And people are all outcast or shunned, just kind of scraping an existence away. And it's cool to hear you say that, because it really does feel like that is the logical conclusion of something like a funnel, of like people being assets basically on your journey to discovering not who the heroes are, just the people that might live to see morning.
Who's going to see the sun come up?
Yeah, just who might live to see morning, who might live to dig a rotting radish out of the ground for dinner, which is, it's all vibes, right? And it starts with that black and white, like very grim sort of like feeling rule book, and it might end up in a different place in other expansions, but I think that's why Jay loved picking yours, was you've just carried that tone forever.
Yeah, and that is like, there will be products that I will release that will have full color covers that will be bright, but everything on the inside is always going to be black and white, because as I said, it to me, it just gives it so much more mystery.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
When your books have that zine feel too, because of it, like you can definitely see your punk rock roots, where you've basically made a DCC version of a punk zine, which is super cool, and it feels like that from like the layout and the art and stuff too, and the storytelling.
I have to interject. I can't take credit for that. Part of the attraction to DCC, once I discovered that I loved the system and was excited about it, it's when I realized that DCC was also my people, because so many people that are involved in Dungeon Crawl Classics. Goodman Games has a very liberal third-party license that allows people to make content for their game, and there is a huge zine culture surrounding DCC. And so when I started, exploring, what else is out there, and there were all these zines, I was like, oh, I can do this too. These are my people. These are punks and metalheads that also game.
Yeah, it's funny. My friend Chris Kohler from Slow Death Games said the same thing, when he was like, the Venn diagram overlap there is massive, because it's people used to doing it for themselves and doing it to a certain style. And so because everybody's kind of not in the joke, but like in these like similar worlds, you feel really at home, like really fast, even though the topic is different. It's not music, it's this art and writing.
Very much so.
That's awesome. Sweet. Well, then I guess it's time to head to Stennard. We have to
gonna head over the bridge.
yeah, pack a bag of rotten radishes to snack on along the way.
We're just going to take a quick stroll over Nick's right shoulder
through the bone fields,
through the bone fields,
through the bone bridge, basically. Yeah, the vomiting leaves.
Nothing bad happens on that bridge. I'm sure.
I'm sure. It's I don't know what the arts or the architectural style is there, but we're going to say it's mid-century Stennard, I guess is the look. All right, and it's time for Bon Voyage.
Pack your bags and chew off your fingers. It's time for Bon Voyage.
All right, so in Bon Voyage, we spoil most things. In this case, it's going to be hard to spoil everything because we're going to talk about a playthrough that we just did,
right? And
then get Nick's impressions of the sort of like take on it that we had versus what his intent was as an artist, which is why it's so exciting to have him here today. So why don't you go and recount the sorry tale of my four unlucky people wandering into this village.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you alluded to, I think one of the big things is whenever you're talking about any kind of interactive piece of entertainment fiction, your narrative experience may vary.
Absolutely.
But in this case, we have a definite starting point and almost certain end point, and we'll see how we got there. So first up, the adventurers arrive in the town of Stennard. And the main part of the first act is establishing the tone, the feel, the themes, the way the town looks, feels, smells, unfortunately.
Yep.
And it is dark. It is oppressive. It is a place suffering from famine, from corruption. I got to try not to do the snap my glasses off and say, you could say it's on the precipice of corruption like every other minute.
I got to do that at the end of the adventure.
There you go.
The best part.
So you come to this town where hope is pretty much a foreign concept. Most of the people there have largely given up. The people that are holding out hope, there's still the basic setup for the adventure is that all the people you encounter are hoping someone else fixes their problem for them.
It feels like there's nowhere else to go. Like
No.
that was what my four adventurers, these four people that out there in kind of the wilds was a worse option, but also this isn't necessarily a better option. This is just the safety in numbers.
You're standing on the deck of the Titanic after all the lifeboats have left,
Yeah.
hoping that one of them is coming back or something else is coming back.
And this village is surrounded by mountains, and there's not really any good way in or
You're
good way out.
stuck. You're stuck on the wrong side, let's say, of an impassable mountain. The entire area around it is overgrown with weeds and brambles and plants that offer nothing useful to the people who live in the area. And there's a growing sense and knowledge that things are unwell, that there is in fact an unnatural corruption underlying all of these hardships that these people are facing. Mm-hmm. So the reason you have come to Stennard, because obviously the question becomes, if you came here from somewhere else, why the hell did you come here?
Yeah.
If you've come to Stennard, the reason you've come to Stennard is because a call has been put out to find, my reflex is to say brave, but instead I'm going to say desperate adventurers that are willing to go find the lost hunters. So this town, I mentioned earlier, they're waiting for someone else to save them. They have sent out a hunting party to try and find some game or some kind of food or anything useful or helpful that will help them, again, see that next dawn. And they've all gone missing. So luckily, the town coffers of Stennard are overflowing with copper pennies.
So many copper pennies.
Yeah,
it's all the former internal plumbing of the village has been turned.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all been stripped. That's why there's no electricity in town. All the wires have been pulled.
Yeah, exactly. Copper pipe.
So the adventurers are offered the princely sum of 10 copper pieces, which I'm sure we'll get to when Nick comes back in afterwards. But Nick set a copper standard for the game, and it really, like, you wouldn't think it really contributes to kind of the oppressive feel because everybody is poor. And when everybody is poor, it doesn't, like, it's not like a traditional D&D game where it's like, yeah, but I'll just go take the hoard of treasure away from, oh no, wait, everyone is poor.
Yeah,
there is no hoard of treasure.
Yeah.
So you've been offered the princely sum of 10 copper pieces to find the lost hunters, return to town with either them or news of what has befallen them.
All right. So I'm gonna take 2 seconds then just to describe who these people are that have wandered into town, because this is where I come into it. And I've had to form, or had randomly generated for me, my adventuring party. And this group of 4 people are an unlikely bunch. There's a blacksmith he probably had the best stat roll of my group, in that he only has 1 negative stat and then 3 positive ones, which was pretty cool. He's equipped with a hammer, some tongs, and 10 feet of chain. And the chain is probably the most expensive thing that they own, because it's that much iron, which is very interesting. I've got a cartographer who is into astronomy. He's got a spyglass, which I'm sure is probably... Actually, I should say that's probably the most expensive thing they all have. A dagger, but he's kind of just like mealy-mouthed and weak. Although, weirdly, for some reason in his backstory, he can speak Kobold. And then I have what is kindly referred to, as opposed to being one of the poors, as being a mendicant. He's a mendicant. He is a guy who relies on the charity of others. He's got a club, and most interestingly, he was generated with cheese dip and 50 feet of rope as his equipment. And then finally, the most capable person in my bunch, who has hide armor and a long sword, which is a fabulous piece of starting gear, is my mercenary, who has entirely negative stats, has nothing good going for them except a high hit point count of 3 and a high luck stat of 14. And these are the 4 people who wander in. We have like a decrepit old mercenary with nothing else going for them. A literal like pilgrim with no food, or well, he has food. The only food he has cheese dip, but nothing to dip into it. Which is
he only has condiments.
Yeah,
no actual.
He's the
nothing to serve his condiment with.
Just call him the condiment king. And then we have our astrologer and our blacksmith. So the blacksmith's kind of the healthiest and has like the protagonist stats. So he was kind of the one I was rooting for going into this whole thing.
This is called foreshadowing.
And this is called foreshadowing. Yeah. So we wander into town, and I will say that this is a brilliant note, which I assume was writing, and Nick can correct me if it wasn't, but the first thing we noticed when we entered into town is there's no animals of any kind. There's some people huddled around a fire. There's literally no animals, which is so weird for a farming town, that nothing living is there except for the people. And that kind of that kind of instantly tipped us off to what's going on here. And that the rain has basically caused the crops to rot in the field, and they're barely edible, if they're edible at all. So we wandered in, and then what happened?
And I think one of the important things to call out is, gee, Ash, why didn't you bother naming any of these characters right at the start?
Oh, I knew what this was about.
Don't get attached to the new fish.
Yeah, it's the same reason why I don't name anyone in Mordheim until they do something interesting. And I never name my warband leader, because I'm always on the run from the game. I know that the game itself hates me.
All right. So after a sort of a brief interaction with a couple of the townsfolk, where the party learns that maybe not all is as it seems, and that perhaps 1 or 2 of the members of the hunting party are unsavory individuals. The party approaches the town constable, Clarissa Hems. And Clarissa Hems seems genuinely interested in recovering the hunters, in particular her son, because as you would.
Yeah.
And after a brief conversation with the party, informs them that she'll be holding the town hall meeting the next day, where they will be charging whoever comes to the area to go help recover her beloved son, and also the rest of the hunting party.
Yeah, and she spits when she says one of the names that she says.
Vela. Yeah, there's a quick Vela.
Yeah, she spits on the ground. But as we kind of like walk through the town hall and find a place to like lay our heads for the night, we hear some muttering, one about her son, because some people have a bad opinion of him, and also about Vela, that she's a witch.
Yes.
There's people that say that just terrible things are happening around her all the time, and that she's not to be trusted. So we have 2 people of the 5 that have gone missing, where it's like,
they're probably not worth saving.
This is probably
I wouldn't
something
waste
bad,
time.
or this maybe is how they fell to misadventure, that they haven't come back.
So the following day, the town hall meeting is raised. The group finds there's also a number of other pseudo-adventurers, let's call them, proto-adventurers in town that may also be partaking in this quest, possibly seeding for some ideas for later.
It feels like they were like, well, I'll take a walk for 10 gold crowns. Like, this seems they're 10.
Whoa, let's back that up.
Sorry,
gold crowns?
Yeah, not gold crowns, 10 coppers. They're like, I'll go take a walk for 10
Calm
coppers.
down, King Charles.
Fine. Yeah, sorry.
All right.
King Charles.
So the party again hears a few more rumors about a few more rumors about Vela and also Tuckerin, who is Clarissa's son, which is, again, continuing to plant the seeds that these might not be the best of people.
Yeah.
So off they go. They travel through the brambles and the woods and mostly the brambles, thistle bushes, weeds,
Rotting
more
crops,
weeds, extra layers of
Lots
weeds.
of rotting crops. And the road's not very well used. Like, it looks like no one's been this way in a while.
Even though we know the hunters have been this way. So there's like an unnatural element to the unhealthy growth.
Yeah. It's got a real color out of space kind of plants growing around here.
Exactly. And eventually the group comes to a bridge, which once again, we can see over Nick's right shoulder.
Nick, you point the bridge.
Or it can be, there we go.
Hey.
And this is definitely one where Ash will hopefully overlay the black and white image, because that color piece of art looks amazing, but the black and white image is the spookiest thing I've seen in a role-playing product in a long time.
Yeah, and so do two of my characters. They also think that.
Yes. So at this point, the party of 4 becomes a party of 2.
Literally, I haven't rolled dice yet. And the first thing I have to do is when I see that bridge, I have to make a will check for everybody. And my astrologer rolls a 1 and my mendicant rolls a 2. And they immediately just fuck off and leave. They're just gone. They die with no dice rolls, no enemies. They never even see a bad guy. They just decide to leave. And I've got 2 party members left.
Yeah. So we cut the party in half at the first die roll of the game, basically. Yeah. So they approach, first, well, I guess not first, because we had all those social roles before that.
Yeah, it was just the mummy all of a sudden where it's like,
yes,
O'Connor, yeah, I got all the horses. And it's just O'Connor and what's her name left, and everyone else is left.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
So happily, though, for you, the astrologer, before running off, used his super fancy spyglass to realize that there was a fallen person beneath all the detritus and broken leaves and branches and things on the bridge. So Ash was simultaneously brave, but also cautious. So approached the bridge with his 10-foot pole.
That's right. Okay, so the mercenary also had a 10-foot pole.
Yes, because
I had 50 feet of rope, a 10-foot pole, and a 10-foot chain. This was the most overly cautiously equipped party of all time.
This fantastic. Is between four characters. You were clearing the amount a traditional old school D&D character would just be clearing on their own.
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
So finding a body on the bridge, it was time to poke a body with a stick.
Look, man, we watched. It was. We're having. What is it? Stand by me moment here. We were just like, hey, kid, we were waiting around every corner for a Kiefer Sutherland to show up.
See, I can tell my level of cultural knowledge is slowly giving way, because to me it wasn't a Stand by Me moment. It was a home movies moment.
Yeah, fair enough.
Hey, kids, who wants to help Coach McGurk identify a dead body?
That's it. Yeah, perfect.
So we poked at the body with a stick for a bit, then got closer, and surprise, surprise. You got worms and grubs in your eyes.
Yeah. I got very Starro for a second there. Something came out of it. And
so the almost dead hunter on the bridge had been infested with corpse crawlers, which then immediately emerged and attacked the remaining half of the party.
Yep.
Luckily, they actually did pretty well in this encounter.
Well, wounded my mercenary, so down to 2 hit points left. I should mention 2 of my characters had 1 hit point to start. 1 had 2 and the mercenary had 3. So I was already down to 2 characters with 2 hit points when we got this far.
There you go. So, but everything's fine. It's all fine. Everything's fine.
I got my stick. I can poke whatever I want.
And actually, the best part was the high point is the 2 characters that were remaining afterwards. Both, and I've never seen this before, even with like larger parties, both managed to find objects on the bridge, like useful objects. So a longsword was discovered and a short bow with a virtual cornucopia of 6 arrows, a supply that could clearly never be exhausted.
That's it. And a longsword. And we found a longsword too. So we were both all of a sudden armed with a bow and a longsword. So my mercenary took the bow because she already had a longsword. He already had a longsword. And my blacksmith now is equipped with a longsword, a hammer, and tongs.
There you go. So from the bridge, we carried on again through more.
Oh, we identified this was one of the missing.
Oh, sorry. Yes, this is one of our missing hunters. So now we're looking for 4 out of 5 from this point forward. So we moved on again through the rotten overgrowth, eventually finding the entrance to a hidden lair. And this is actually For me personally, this is one of my favorite parts of the adventure because I felt like a big brain the first time I played because I figured out what to do the first time. But also because, again, sticking with that theme of you got to pay to play.
Oh my God.
This is a moment where your incredibly fragile characters have to make a bad decision if they want to continue moving forward. And that is you come to a wall. There are a couple of skulls on short plinths on either side of the wall. The skulls are modeled with like maggots pouring out of them. And on a successful check, you realize that one of the skulls has some dried blood on the lower teeth. And if you pay the price of blood, you can probably proceed.
Yeah. So we did. And now my mercenary has 1 hit point left.
So,
and then I asked Jay, so like, can I just take a short rest and get some hit points back? He's like, you can rest for a day and get some hit points back. And I was like, oh my God, everyone's going to die.
This is not your children's Dungeons and Dragons.
Not at all.
No. So a portal opens up, an extremely disturbing portal. Like there's been a lot of disturbing imagery, but the disturbing imagery has all existed in a practical space.
Yeah.
So the bridge is a physical construct. Yes, it has the skull entrance.
You can walk around it though and kind of like scope it out.
And the wind passes through it and makes a moaning sound. You've seen the skulls with the maggots, but again, these are statues, they're sculptures, they're things that could be made in the real world. The portal opens up and you're greeted by this steam with these transparent centipedes floating their way through it. And I think this was the first moment where you're like, oh.
Also, I had to make another will check, which they both luckily passed.
Yes.
And because it could have just been another moment where they just both went nope and went home and the adventure
all right, adventure's over. We played for 5 minutes. Let's go home.
Yeah, that's right. There's 10 coppers is not worth whatever this is.
So the party bravely, I'm going to say bravely,
we throw the chain through it at one point just to see if we hit anything on the other side or wake anything up. We poked the 10-foot pole through it, and then eventually we're like, well, I guess unless we're going home, this is all we got, so we got to walk through.
So the party, so maybe not bravely, maybe resignedly, advanced through the portal.
Look, the mercenary's got some gambling debts, man. He owes some people some money. He needs this copper. He's got no other choice. He's got nowhere to go.
Those people are all dead. I wouldn't worry about it. Everyone's dead. So once they advance through the portal, they emerge into what is effectively, this is basically the chapter break in the adventure.
Yeah.
Is you have the exterior exploration and then you enter into the temple. So you enter into the temple area. When you first enter into it, you're greeted by a fairly benign hallway, although there's still a few, like you hear these ringing bells, which are off-putting.
Yeah.
You can hear this skittering and chittering, and you can hear these...
We're having like a resolve tested by the environment quite a bit as we walk through here. It's the horror tropes are pretty high. There's gonging happening around you, like atonal sounds. And
this is the moment where nothing terrible is happening to you in the moment, and yet you realize you're in a horror movie.
That violin screech in the horror movie is just like building. It's like...
And we are greeted by I shouldn't say finally because we've had the corpse crawler before, but we are greeted by the first thing that as a D&D player you would consider to be a traditional monster.
Yeah. We open a door.
And out pop the first 2 no lids.
Yep.
So these are kind of like these small, corrupt, broken figures. And I'm going to cut back to Nick in a second because I think Nick should get into what the no lids are and what they aren't. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I really liked, so when we were playing, I really like the old S series of D&D adventures. And when those got their second printing, one of the things every single one of them had was a book of art. So that when you would go into like room 38, you would give the player a picture of room 38.
And we did that during the game. You handed me.
Yeah. So today, instead of a lot of, I did go through all the descriptions, but the first time Ash encountered the no lids, I had printed the page with the full page picture of the no lid.
And it was so immersive. It was a super cool.
Absolutely. So Nick, can you share about the no lids just for a minute?
Yeah. So one of the things in the DCC rulebook in the judges section is this idea that monsters should be unique. And I really wanted to lean hard into that. And so like the traditional thing that you would encounter in a first level adventure is goblins. And so I needed to make my own goblins. And so first idea was, well, one is that they are actually human beings that have been so corrupted by the corrupting influences of the region, the magic that is corrupting everything in the region. It has caused their bodies to become twisted and malformed, but also because they need to take it to the next level. Their particular little subset, they're into extreme body modification, and so no-lids comes from them cutting off their own eyelids as an act of fealty to a greater power.
Yeah, it's jarring. It is super jarring when you first like think about what that is and you see the picture and you're like, oh, and their corneas are all like scratched because they're dried out. Their eyes are like milky. It is disturbing.
And I think this really underscores one of the things that that makes a lot of old school games, but in particular this, feel really immersive, is we are also used to, as Nick mentioned and as the DCC rulebook mentions, the idea of your DM just saying to you, you encounter 2 goblins, you encounter 4 goblins, you encounter whatever. And even if you've never played a role-playing game before, if you've seen a Tolkien movie, if you've played World of Warcraft, if you've done whatever, you know what those things are. You kind of have an image in your head, and honestly, that's underwhelming. Mm-hmm. But when you describe these creatures and then see a picture of what they look like, they are menacing. Like they do not feel like the level 1 version of a monster for a game. They are menacing.
Well, you're seeing past the stat
stat
block, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the cool thing, is that you get that, and that's baked into DCC, which I think is cool. Make them unique. Get like that old school way of give a visual, and you have a different experience as a player, because like I could actually smell these things in my head. You know what I mean? Like they had that like decaying, decrepit kind of.
That's just because I didn't shower this morning. Sorry.
Also,
my bad.
It's a warmer winter day here. The sun's really heating up the studio, but the encounter goes far better than I think it should. Although the mercenary immediately proves to be completely and utterly incapable, just shooting arrows into nothing. But the blacksmith just instantly dispatches both no-lids. It was great.
Yeah, because the blacksmith is the protagonist, and there's the one that's going to survive till the end.
Real main character.
Oh
energy.
man,
he thinks he's the protagonist. For
I
sure.
feel so good about where this is going to end for the blacksmith. So anyway,
I'm riding on cloud 9. I'm like, go blacksmith. This is the best.
And it was genuinely one of those things where the die rolls completely went your way. Like it.
Yeah, and it really feels at that point like the first act of a horror movie.
I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, I'm going to be okay. It's going to be fine. It's like watching Cabin in the Woods before the motorcycle jump. Right before the motorcycle jump.
Now I want to picture one of the no-lids jumping the canyon on the motorcycle. But we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that after the bridge.
Yeah, we got real Chris Hemsworth energy coming out of the blacksmith at this point.
So we move on. And then we come to a bridge. We come to a bridge over a chasm. And on the far side of the bridge are 2 more no-lids, a guy in an orange robe. And because I modified the adventure slightly for fear of what was about to happen to Ash, also probably our big bad for the adventure, Gorsek. Gorsek.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they can start whispering Gorsek, and we don't know what it means, but they're just saying it over and over again.
So the encounter starts off by Gorsek kicking one of these hunters off the edge of this this chasm.
Mm-hmm. It's real end of Bone Tomahawk that we're walking into.
And it's funny because in the first half of the description, you feel like, oh crap, like I was supposed to save these people, and he just kicked one of them to death. And then it somehow feels worse, because after he kicks him over the edge, you realize that this character is bound by his hands to a rope attached to the end of a chain. So he drops like 20 feet, and then you just hear this like pathetic moaning sound as his wrists and shoulders cease being functional as wrists and shoulders.
Yeah, as you realize that all of the bones in his arms are separated from his body.
I can save you, but I'm not sure if you're worth saving anymore. So the no-lids advance across the bridge. A fight ensues. There is some desperate consideration given to cutting the bridge, which has serious implications because we won't be saving anybody if we cut the bridge.
Yeah, we cut one and we dump a no-lid that way.
No. You got the no-lids without
that's
that.
Right, I did. That's
it
right,
was
I
when
did,
Gorsek came across the bridge that you decided to cut one of the ropes and hope to dump him off.
And this is where the blacksmith immediately fails to be a hero.
Yes. So the blacksmith, spoiler warning, we're pouring a 40 out on the curb now.
Yeah.
Gorsek comes up, and I had this exact same experience the last time I participated in this as a player, which is the character that you think has been doing great and is awesome is immediately turned into paste
like,
on the ground.
Like 4 times his hit point count he takes.
So the most hit points any character could possibly have, barring a bonus, is like 4, basically. Yeah. The first strike from Gorsek does 9 points of damage.
I've also put 2 arrows into him at this point, and he's just like shearing them off himself, just walking around because he doesn't care. He's full on. When you see Lurtz for the first time at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, that's who this guy is. He is just this towering beef slab covered in armor with a mace that looks like it's made out of 10 maces.
And he's also Stannis Baratheon because he keeps demanding that you take a knee to him.
Right. Yeah, so he's screaming Neil at me over and over again. I thought he was looking for someone named Neil. I had no idea.
Right?
Yeah. I was
you
like,
for old astronauts? Neil, what the hell's going on here?
There's no Neil in the party. If there is, he ran away at the bridge.
So they slice the bridge. Gorsek manages to make his reflex save, catch himself, and he shimmies along the bridge, and they get, I think it turned out to be 3 rounds of free attacks at Gorsek.
Well,
and
one person does because one's already dead.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just
and he just keeps coming. And it's not because you missed him every time. It's because he just keeps
I plug
coming.
him with 2 more arrows, and then I end up, he's at the edge, and I managed to stab him to death with the long
So
sword.
now he's basically a cross between Lurtz and the T-1000.
Yeah. But for that final hit, as he's about to hit me, because I managed to win initiative, I have to spend almost half my luck pool fudging the dice roll to hit this guy, and I get just enough damage to off him, and he slides down my sword and basically falls, and that's it.
So Nick, obviously when people see the gameplay video, they'll see my take on Gorsek. But you made him by far the biggest character in this game the 2 times I played the adventure with you. So tell us a bit about Gorsek.
So Gorsek went through a metamorphosis because once again, that idea of there being no standard monsters. Originally, I was like, oh, what leads goblins? Oh, a bugbear. So then he was a human in a bugbear suit, and then like gutted a bugbear and then wore it. And then I was like, no, this is a 7-foot tall former human that like sews bits of his armor into his skin. He is just an absolute monster, and he was designed to be a Saturday morning cartoon villain. He's
Super Shredder. He's not just Shredder, he's Super Shredder.
But I deliberately, because it's a funnel adventure and all of the monsters leading up are kind of soft. Gorsek, in order to punctuate the nastiness of the setting and the feel, he is designed to one-shot a peasant every single round that he can get a hit. So yeah, he is just an absolute beast, and he's designed that way, and it makes people hate him, which is what I love.
Yeah, at the end of this, I have a mercenary with 1 hit point left as my only character remaining, and they have a strength of 6, meaning that they can't even barely lift up their longsword, let alone rescue poor Jelly Arm Joe, who's hanging down the side of this pit at this point. It was an encounter that almost no one walked away from.
But in the end, 1 person walked away. So our brave mercenary, resigned mercenary,
he's made bad investments. That's all I'm going to say. He's got
walked across the bridge, and I did fudge the. So in the encounter to lift Eames up, which is our hunter who's now dangling by this rope and chain, you're supposed to have a total strength of 30. Sorry, that was the thing. It was supposed to be a total strength of 30. And Ash had 1 character with a total strength of 6.
So I got to make an intelligence check to
which for you math aficionados is less than 30.
Yeah, it's 5 times less.
So he luckily he'd been watching Mighty Machines with his kids when they were younger. So he came up with a lever and pulley system.
I used my 8-foot pole because we made 2 torches out of 2 feet of it. And then my chain and rope. I didn't have the rope, sorry, my chain to create basically like a pulley system to like lever this guy up.
So we got him up, and it's all good. And everything's fine. And honestly, at this point, you've defeated the big bad of the adventure and you've still got a hit point left. So I mean, everything's going to be great going forward.
Except this guy is crawling with body worms.
Oh yes, because he's got a corpse worm just hanging off of him.
Yeah, which almost kills me.
Well, let's be honest. I mean, I said there was no witnesses, but here's the problem. So in an attempt to finish off the corpse worm, instead Ash finishes off our poor villager.
Yeah, I fumbled to hit on the corpse
with a misplaced strike against the worm.
Yeah, I kind of stabbed through it. Like I wasn't really looking what was behind. Yeah, it was some downrange trauma that happened to poor, I can't remember his name, Udo or whatever his name was. Eanes. Yeah, he had a bad day.
So we move on. And now we move on to a hallway filled with our next, in my mind, incredibly unsettling image, which is a hallway lined with these 6 sculptured faces.
It felt like each one was a sin. Like they're all representing a different like sin. Can you talk about this a bit, Nick? Like what these faces are?
Yeah, so the Hall of Twisted Faces, they are the 6 different faces of Hurlazek, the debased god. And yes, it's kind of like sins. They represent greed. Now I'm gonna have to consult. But yeah, greed. We've got let's see, there's the mouth of chitinous insects, the mouth of fattened maggots, the mouth of probing tongues, the mouth of spilling waste, the mouth of bronze teeth, and the mouth of greed. And
so basically he's a taster's pack of debasement.
Yes, all sorts of debasement. And so, and they shift and change form, so every time you look at a face, it's different. And they are all trying to lure you in to just take a little sample.
So here's the thing. At this point, the mercenary's just like, nope, not doing it. He had real like dead Ron Swanson eyes at this point as he's just walking down this hallway, and Jay kept being like, make a will check. And I just walked all the way to the end of the hall and didn't touch a goddamn thing. He was all done with this place at this point. There was no chance he was going to interact with anything he didn't have to interact with.
Yeah, that is a normal occurrence. There's usually if the party's feeling good, there will be that one person that's like, I gotta try it, and especially because one of the faces will spill silver pieces onto the ground, and that's like, oh hey, this one's spitting out silver pieces, should I put my hand in the mouth? Yeah,
no, I was fully Lawrence Fishburne at the end of Event Horizon at this point. I was like, nope, fuck this ship, and I just left.
I can tell you from experience though, if you've got a character who's greedy enough, they'll stick their hand in there.
I bet they will. I bet they will.
I'm not saying I make all bad decisions, but if there's a bad decision, I like to at least poke at it a little bit.
I'm just saying my 1 hit point remaining mercenary was not trifling. Let's just say that one trifling with nothing.
But if that weren't enough, we arrive at what is our final door. And our final door has a skull inset into it with 2 red glowing gems.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, man, I have no idea how you resisted that urge, because
nope. I know what 2 red gems on the cover of a rulebook do. I've been there before. I know what that's an homage to. There was no chance I was touching anything. I was just noping my way through the whole thing. I was like, nope.
See, when I went through this as a player, I could not steal that shit fast enough.
Yeah.
And Nick, do you want to share anything about that? Because obviously, because I have such fond memories of that. That is one of my favorite parts of the adventure.
Yeah. So obviously the eyes are gems worth an incredible amount of money, but they are cursed gems. And you pried out one of those gems and ended up becoming immortalized in the canon, because the gems cause you to vomit coins and insects and all sorts of things, because you feel this compulsion to hold onto this gem, and there's reward, like if you throw up some coins, hey, I just made some coin, but yeah, they are there to really kind of reinforce that, if you let greed take the better of you, that they will take the better of you.
Yeah, I was having my Alfred moment where it's like, I saw a child playing with the ruby, the size of a tangerine. It was that moment. I was like, this has no value. I was the robber in the woods being like, I just threw it away. I didn't care. There was no way. There's no one to even sell this to.
So I'm just gonna double check. The coin swallower is still available on Drive-Thru RPG, right?
Yes, the coin swallower is still available.
Excellent.
Well, with not a lot of confidence, I approach this door and open it.
And of course, and again, I feel like I'm just sitting here stroking Nick's ego, but this is one of those perfectly written moments because every door that preceded this door required substantial effort to open.
Yeah.
Like it required strength checks. It resisted the party a little bit. And because Ash was so hesitant at this point, he just like lightly pushed on the door. And this is the only door in the entire complex that it's light as a feather.
Yeah.
It just swings on a swivel.
It's such a good touch.
No
that,
problem.
Yeah, that I'm so hesitant at this point, and this one just goes, and I'm like, this is even more ominous than the ones that wouldn't open.
So when we enter the altar room, in the altar room, so this is if you're playing it as written, this is where you would actually encounter Gorsek. And there is also a priest in an orange robe, and we find our two of what we believe our final 3 hunters are chained to 2 of the pillars in this room.
Mm-hmm. And this is where I stop going in guns blazing. I decide to start making sneak checks, and I'm like, yeah, we need to be a little more cautious, I think, at this point. We've been cautious, but we're like moving heavy doors and stuff like that. So I'm like, can I get to these people without alerting the robed figure? And so I make my stealth check, and I make it over to the girl because she's the one that seems to be a little more mobile. Yeah.
So he makes his way over to Vela, who is... I was curious if you were going to make that choice because we'd planted all the seeds that Vela was a terrible person and shouldn't be trusted.
Yeah. Well, she was now chained up, so I figured she couldn't be involved in whatever the hell this is.
So you were marginally successful, I guess would be the way to put it. It took a little too long. It made a little too much noise.
Yeah. I eventually alert the robed figure, and it starts looking around to see what's making the noise.
But you were able to get Vela unchained. And then Vela and the mercenary attempted to execute a flanking maneuver to take out the orange robed figure, but it didn't go great. It went okay.
Him with an arrow.
It went okay.
Yeah, I scared the hell out of him.
Yeah, you definitely did most of his hit points to him right away, and he just took off. He just booked it.
Yeah, and this is the last time I ever hit anything with this bow that I find.
So he books it. Paralyzes Vela, so she just drops.
Yeah, I give her one of the remaining long swords so she can help me. But
so she was going to help, but she becomes a complete non-participant very quickly.
Yeah, drops to the ground.
So he scoots off, executes the Rick O'Connell escape plan, jumps on the bridge, which is now only held on by one rope, cuts the remaining rope to do the swing across. At which point, being out of arrows, you fire your last arrow, and then it turns into Ash reading down the list of things his character has that he figures he can throw far enough to hit this guy before he gets away. And of all things, he threw all the things that you'd be like, yeah, you can throw that.
I can live without this. I throw the pole, I throw my tongs, I throw literally everything I have at him, and all I'm left holding is the longsword. And I'm like, I know there's a spare of these lying next to Bella's corpse, so I should be okay. And I throw it, and he's got what? He had an armor class of 9.
9 and 1 hit point.
I rolled a 4, and I only had 5 luck points left. So I ended the game with a luck of 0, fudging that roll to throw my sword 30 feet across a chasm at a guy climbing the remains of a rope bridge and knock him off of it.
So we have managed to defeat all of the enemies that are apparent here. We make our way back. We're able to revive Vela as the paralysis wears off.
I still have a sword, thankfully.
Release Narub, who is, an objective marker, but completely physically useless as far as the rest of the adventure goes.
He's a witness, is what he is.
He's the witness.
For what I have planned at this point, he's a witness.
He's David Wenham in 300.
Yeah,
that's who he is.
Exactly, because I'm interrogating them about what happened, and what I discover is that the son of the constable has bargained these 5 kids, basically, or 4 kids, to this cult leader for whatever unknown reason. They have no idea why. And that the girl is terrified to go back to the village because they say she's a witch. And the boy is basically catatonic. Like can't even talk.
So in a linear traditional fantasy adventure setting, right? Like Gorsek and the Listaru, who's the priest of the Orange Coven, they are your traditional villains. And Nick mentioned how much people hate Gorsek. I loved Gorsek. I hated my characters getting killed by Gorsek, but I loved Gorsek. But now I want Nick to talk about the character that I truly hate the most, which is Tuckerin fucking Hems.
This is the guy who's disappeared. He's just wandered off after he's dropped these kids off in this cult pool.
Yes. So essentially, Tucker and Hems is the snotty son of the constable. Has all of those kind of rich kid kind of entitled vibes. But because he's set up for success, he is actually a good hunter. But he has been corrupted by dark forces, the Orange Coven, and so in order to debase himself, he is decided to betray all of the best hunters that they can find in Stennard to go on this mission. His whole point of being is to betray others.
That's
and
amazing.
so he is so universally hated. Yes, in a very different way than Gorsek. Gorsek is scary. Tuckerin is just so hateable because of the fact that he is just this like so privileged and yet willing to sell out everyone in order to get his own way.
Well, at this point, the mercenary has kind of sussed this out. So as he's leaving the cave with these two kids, he decides to behead Gorsek, bring the robe and the jeweled dagger of this cult leader with him, because he's going to make an example going back to this village, because this girl is terrified to go back. And finding her chained up, you realize she's got nothing to do with it. And this kid must be either hiding back in the village or on the run somewhere. So we head back to town, but I've got proof of what happened.
And I just to underscore it, I have to say Tuckerin, I don't know why I can never remember this character's name. Tuckerin gives me the same vibe as the scumbag with the beard in the first Die Hard movie.
Yeah.
That's who he is to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of we engineer our way back by using the manacles and stuff like that to hook the rope bridge, like haul it back up to us. We get it connected enough we can get across with this poor catatonic boy, and we head back to the village. And I enter the village just shouting the kid's name, just being like, basically yelling for him to come out. And the villagers are staring at me as I'm holding the head of a monster, a sword, and these two kids who I've clearly rescued and brought back. And I just head to the fire in the middle of town and start shouting for the constable or her son.
So at this point, we get to our end game, which depending on and again, one of the things I mentioned to Ash when we were done playing, Nick has structured the adventure so that Clarissa Hems can have multiple different motivations based on her alignment. And at this point, Ash is 100% convinced that she's in on it and that she's a horrible person.
Yeah, she's hiding her son.
She's hiding her son in town.
Yeah, this is all false flag to try and prove her son's gone.
Which is not the case. She's just incredibly naive about, how foul her son truly is. But it doesn't escalate into like a violent confrontation. It just escalates into y'all ain't welcome around here no more.
And they don't believe the girl because they think she's a witch, but they do believe the boy because he has no reason to lie.
So again, having killed all the fireflies in the operating room,
I did go a little Joel, didn't I?
You went a little Joel there.
So my take on it was I was Little Bill at the end of Unforgiven. That's my stats are terrible, but I've seen a few things and done a few things.
So Little Bill and Vela walk off into the sickly looking sunset as they leave Stennard behind, possibly heading for Hillwood Camp. Who knows?
Yeah, we don't know where we're going at this point, but I have 3 hit points again because I've rested for a day. But it's going to be 2 weeks before my luck comes back because you only get a luck point back per day, and I'm at 0 luck. So I'm 10 coppers richer. I've got Vela, who is now my sidekick basically, and we're limping out of town basically no better than we were.
So, beforehand. I would wait to see how it plays out, but I think there's a good chance that you're actually Vela's sidekick.
That's entirely possible. Yeah, that's entirely possible. Well, that's The Last of Us Part 2.
There you go. So Nick, obviously, I'm framing this from the point of view of what Ash experienced playing through the adventure. From a plot point of view, is there anything you want to add on to this?
No, you hit all the points. And I'm glad that you mentioned that Clarissa Hems can have a one of the things that I should have mentioned earlier, talking about the mechanics of DCC, and one of the things that drew me in is that randomization is the great equalizer. That is one of the things that is that is core to DCC. And so I try to insert randomization in as much as I can. And so Clarissa Hems having a random alignment that you generate is something that really can change the tone, but usually everybody assumes she's the worst, regardless of her vibes. But yeah, you as far as the plot points, you hit all the plot points.
Sweet. Well, then I guess it's time to pack our turnips, count our copper pieces, and out there in the distance to spend the night, because we're no longer welcome in the village. There's the ruins of what looks like an ancient hospital. So we have to as we sidle up to it, we notice that to one side there's a vendor and there's also a gallery. So we could either go in, I don't know what this hospital was selling that was in the gift shop. Maybe it was flowers for the inmates or something like that. But the other side seems to be the paintings made by the raving lunatics inside. So we have to decide if we're going to go left into the gift shop or right into the gallery.
Gallery to the left, gift shop to the right. Have your tickets ready for the Dark Exhibition.
All right, so this part is the Dark Exhibitions. The Dark Exhibition is where we talk about art versus product. And obviously Nick's not, this is going to be uncomfortable for Nick basically as to where we land on this. But he can be free to chime in when this is over.
Do we just start staring into the camera and screaming, "You're a sellout, Nick"? Like,
Yeah.
is that the like gotcha, like tabloid TV moment we pull off?
The
now?
most punk rock thing you could possibly be is to sell out at this point. So I'm going to start this one. Actually, you picked this one, so you start this one.
Sure. Okay. So obviously, I'm gonna say this is art, and there's a couple of reasons for it, as there always are. So the first is having seen how the sausage is made, having been there from the start, having talked to Nick through the whole process. This is the least guessy answer I've ever had to give to any of these things, right? Like I know what underlied his desire to do this and create it. So it's a cheat. I knew the answer, and the answer was art. Now, to come back to it from the outside looking in, I would still see it the same from the outside looking in. And the reason for that, for me, is DCC again has this appeal from this like old school aesthetic, old school sort of gonzo feel. And it is not the most financially successful or viable thing that you can create. If you're going to create something as a third-party creator with the hope that you sell 1 billion copies, you're going to create that for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, right? You're basically
do an open game
you're working under the same kinds of rules and regulations and restrictions. So if you're going to make something that you want to have a vast appeal and a vast marketability, that would be the way to go. The other part of it for me, and this is why I've loved everything Nick's written, and this is why I've supported every single one of Nick's Kickstarters, is Nick has taken the hardest, darkest edge of how Dungeon Crawl Classics typically presents itself and leaned all the way into it. Mm-hmm. Like, it's something that you can look at and definitely say, this is not for everyone, but everyone this is for is really going to get it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. So my take on this is going to be as morally gray as the Precipice of Corruption is. I'm going to say this rides the line. Like, I honestly think this is, because it's such a tone poem and because it sits in its feeling so much, in its vibes, that's the art side of it to me. And like you said, it's Nick taking, and we're just going to speak about you in the third person. It's Nick taking the feel that he wants to project and then making that not just an experience, but a sandbox so that it can ride the line between, you have people with like good motivations and bad motivations. That tone poemness of it is the art side of it to me, but the fact that it's set up to lead into other things and it's so well crafted to do that too is the product side of it, because you can see that Nick definitely planned on this being the start of something.
Right.
And so there's like smart design in it as well. So I'm going to say this rides the line in between both. I actually think it's equally good as a product as art, because he's gone in a different direction. He's taken what he liked about Dungeon Crawl Classic, that funneling and grinding out your character, survival horror part of it, and then ridden that tone for the artistic side. And then from the product side is he's designed it in a smart way where if I want to go deeper into this same story of Stennard and this like lost, basically like valley surrounded by these mountains where this corruption is leaking into everything, I can keep going. And to me, that's why it sits right in the middle, is he's done it with an eye to both. And lots of people don't do that. They make a module and it's a one-off and they expect you to carry it into something else versus, and the tone poem is maybe either more direct or more like hitting you on the head. Whereas because you can play through this is a module you can play and have a different outcome every time you play it. That's really rare for an RPG module, where a lot of people do more linear storytelling style and just bang you on the head with the moral or the message or whatever. This one is such a more like a gray and ambiguous thing to go with your gray and ambiguous characters, where you are cutthroats and corsairs and beggars and, you know, like not heroic people that are emerging through a call to action.
It feels like, because especially Clarissa Hems, because she can have different motivations, because the party can interact with different sort of rumors and snippets they learn about the other characters in the hunting party through the rumors that they get from the townsfolk. It's almost reminiscent of the original I6 Ravenloft adventure, where you've got your map remains the same, your monsters remain the same, your stat blocks remain the same, but your view of it and what's actually happening behind the scenes can change based on what some of those random rolls generate for you.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think to me, that's where I land on it. So now you've wandered into the gallery, but I don't think we're going to, I guess we could have Nick comment on his intent. Do you want to do that? Do you want to talk about what your intent was with this? Were you trying to make a work of art, or were you trying to make something you could sell?
Both. Yeah. When you say I rode the line, like
I win.
Yeah. So the fact of the matter is that, like, when I discovered that DCC had a liberal third-party license and there was all these people making content, like the first draft of the Precipice of Corruption was written out long form with block text. And I ran it for, none of the people had ever played Dungeon Crawl Classics before. I hadn't played Dungeon Crawl Classics before. And as we finished the first session, and one of my players was like, "Wait, you wrote this?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then a person sitting next to him was like, "No." I was like, "No, I wrote this." And that's when I knew that I was onto something that people would want. And so I then went through the process of going through and play testing and honing it into something that I knew would be something that, even if it didn't sell well, it was something that I was proud of and loved, and anybody that is into the same types of things that I'm into would probably dig. So it's art, but it's also meant to be a starting point for something bigger.
Yeah, and you definitely did the craftsman part of slaying your darlings, repeat, restructure it, write it over and over and over again. Like, knowing you as a game designer, you have such an iterative process where, like, you'll check plan do over and over again. You could feel it in this because it has such a branching writing style, because you've played it so many times. You realize different things could happen. So I'm excited that came through for me, and that was your intent. Okay, so the no lids living in the asylum. When you come back out of the gallery, I'm just gone, and they have dragged me away into the asylum. You're bashed over the back of the head.
Good.
And now you are also in the asylum. So we wake up locked in a room, and there's scratchings on the walls. We have to decide what they mean and interpret them for themes as we spend the night in the Grim Asylum.
As night descends, we scratch our messages into the walls. Future warnings for inmates of the Grim Asylum.
All right, so the Grim Asylum, this is where we talk about themes and poems and tones, and maybe we'll do the same structure we just did. Sure. You and I will share ours, and then we'll see if any of them really resonated with Nick as what he was going for. That seems like a good way of doing this. So why don't you start with and we usually pick about 3 that we've identified in Grimdark Media as to why it feels grim and dark. And it's as many as we think kind of resonated. So what was your first one?
So I'm going to preface this just by pointing out one thing for anybody who's familiar with Nick's writing and like his overall creations, is that what I'm talking about today is the Precipice of Corruption, this adventure module,
Yeah.
not the larger Stennard campaign setting and all the material that emerges around it.
Or
because,
DCC in general too.
Because
So
if I was doing
Yeah.
Nick's overall writings to this point, I would actually have swapped one of these out for something else.
Gotcha. But this is the tone poem of this
For
particular
this,
adventure.
this contained product.
Got
So the first one I'm going to go with is Hopelessness. To me, it has to be Hopelessness. You could certainly write other adventures in other settings where literal actual starvation is the theme.
Dark Sun. Yeah,
like
Dark Sun, yeah.
the greatest villain in this is you don't know if there's any food for you to eat tomorrow. But it's not common, right? It's not common at all. And the fact that you start off by framing the adventure that you are in this cut off part of the world, that there is no money, that you will not be finding any significant, like in a traditional fantasy, especially a high fantasy adventure, even a lot of grim dark fantasy settings, like if you're playing in like Warhammer's like old world and like the original role-playing game, you can still always go to the next town. It doesn't matter how messed up your town is. You can go to the next town.
Marienburg's out there somewhere.
Yeah, you can find some coin, you can spend it, and you can buy a sandwich. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
In this, the idea that that you're not just fighting monsters and evil and all these cool concepts from a fantasy role-playing game, but the fact that you're fighting to survive against basic things like the elements and starvation. And that is, you're being constantly reminded of that by both the NPCs around you and by the descriptions of the setting itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I had Hopelessness as my first one.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna end up doing that thing where we like Ouroboros again. So my third one down was Bleakness, which I think is it's you and I coming at the same thing from.
It's my second one.
It's your second one, okay? It's you and I coming at the same thing. You went with like the internal, the characters feel hopeless. I went with the external of like the set dressing is so bleak and so like, oh, there's nothing good here. We're not off to have a heroic adventure. We're having a survival horror experience. That's really what it feels like to me, is that like you're just trying to get to the next, muted sunrise. Like I feel like the sun never comes through the gray sort of like mists over this valley at any time.
Look at the friggin' clouds in that painting behind them.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
ridiculous.
That's
None of them are even
like
white.
Like. Yeah,
They
exactly.
move through every gradient except white.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, that's the like tone poem part of it. That I also resonated with. So you also had Bleakness then as your
I had
your
Bleakness
second
as my second one.
Yeah.
And again, that is it's funny that all the art, like I love black and white art, and it's funny that all the art is black and white because I've looked at this art 100 times. I know it's all black and white, but when I picture all these images in my head, they're Old West sepia photos. Like everything is just washed out and crappy. Yeah. And that to me is the view from the inside looking out. So kind of back to what you were talking about hopelessness is the character's point of view on the world. The bleakness is
the world itself.
The world itself.
Them. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. There's nothing good here. Why are we here?
Yeah. So my number one then, to go back around, and we'll end on my number two weirdly because we're doing the Ouroboros, is decay and entropy. And that's to me where that bleakness came from, is the idea that nothing is ever getting better in this world. And we're actually just holding back the decline more than anything else. Like when we left this village, we didn't make anything better. We just kind of halted the decay for two individuals that we got back.
You're literally just raging against the dying.
Yeah, exactly. And they hate you at the end.
Yes.
There's no glory. We come back feeling vengeful and punitive. We part ways. And I'm 3 down, 1 up, basically, in the people count in the party.
Take your 10 pennies and get the hell out of my town.
We literally reenacted The Last of Us.
You are John Rambo in First Blood. No one
Joel
wants
in
you
The Last
here.
of Us.
Get out.
I'm up one rescued kid that can never go home, and that's all I've got. And I'm going on to the next place. So what was your last one then?
So my last one, again, I went back to Book of Eli here. So I cheated off of our original list. Mm-hmm. So apparently I'm going to choose to see this in a lot of places, but I did do the same thing I added in for Book of Eli, which is barbarism.
Yeah.
And part of that is, again, to Nick's description of what the No-Lids and Gorsic are. They're not supernatural or fantasy monsters. They are the monsters that we have become, right? Like they are people who have done horrible things, not only to other people, but to themselves. They've created this this subculture, this sub-society that is just objectively terrible. And they're celebrating in it. They're reveling in it, like Gorsek especially. And then again, even when you go back to the town, like the defining characteristic of all the nameless NPCs in town is who they hate.
Yeah.
It's not what they hope comes the next day. It's who they hate, whether they hate Tuckerin or they hate Clarissa or they hate the Protectorate or they hate, it doesn't matter. Like that is their defining characteristic. They are all turning on each other. They are all looking at each other like, if we don't find a radish, my neighbor will be my next meal.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that the barbarism, brutality, like the feeling of like, it's the, what have we become because of this like bleak, hopeless, decaying like position that we're in. Well, mine was pretty simple. It was death. And it's because death was literally around every corner for me, and it could happen suddenly and brutally and without warning, and anyone in my party could just instantly die. And anyone could instantly die, including the villains that I was fighting. Like they were equal, the no-lids were equally susceptible to death if I just hit them. There's no wiggle, there's no heroic endurance in this. We are all at the edge of extinction, and we could just instantly be snuffed out. That feeling of death being omnipresent and like behind every corner, I could just feel the tiredness of the mercenary as they exited this dungeon, that they were exhausted by this. And this was all, they gave everything they had left, literally all their luck, all their hit points. They were hanging on by a literal thread, and that they were the only one death didn't claim when it was all said and done.
The greatest philosopher of our time, Coolio, did in fact know exactly what he was talking about.
Yeah, that's right. It's true. So now we have, I guess, exited the asylum, and we find the prophet outside, who's going to tell us what the writings on the wall were. He's there sitting in his decayed robes, his fingernails gone from scratching the words into the walls. And he gets to tell us what the themes what the tone poem he was trying to paint was.
I'm telling you right now, Nick, I remember what happened last time I stopped to talk to a prophet on the road outside of Stennard. Do not mess with me.
For sure. You guys, you've nailed all the themes. Like I had jotted down the words futility and collapse. So hopelessness and decay are a huge thing, and that descent into barbarism. But yeah, so where it all started was a misheard lyric. And I don't know if Jay's heard this story. I tell this almost every time I get an opportunity to talk about Stennard, is that I was listening to, when I was writing this adventure, I was listening to Celtic Frost to Megatherion on repeat. And there's a song on there, Dawn of Megiddo, that has the line, or I thought was the line, the crops have failed. And so I needed a hook for my adventure, and so that line was just echoing in my head. And so I had a dungeon. Why are people going into this dungeon? Oh, because the crops have failed. And then my brain started cranking on all the downstream effects of what that would result in. And so ultimately, all of the themes, the bleakness, the futility, the societal collapse, barbarism, all of that is the downstream effects of how society falls apart when it's, pushed against the wall. But I will say it was a misheard lyric, because the actual line, when I eventually went back and looked at the lyrics, it's "the cross has failed," which also works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, well, it's the same thing. It's like, what are we held up by that is keeping us from that? Like, you're only 3 meals away from barbarism, basically, and brutality.
Okay. So I have to ask then, if that was the misheard lyric, and then you realized afterwards what the correct lyric was, and maybe I'm reaching, was that any part of the inspiration for what you did with the Temple of Delvir later on?
No, not really.
Okay.
But yeah, essentially, the whole like, one of the things in the DCC rulebook, in the judge's advice, that I absolutely loved was this idea of the world is small, and since I like to start at the smallest point and build out, I just, okay, I've got a town, it's called Stennard, and then slowly built on those things. but kept the themes the same. One of the things that I'm going to hype, people can download this for pay what you want on Drive Through RPG. It's the Stennard character creation
That's what I was
guide.
telling you about.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it has the themes and the vibe of my take on DCC all built into the character creation process.
Right.
One of the things that this has that, you know, I leaned into is you can start off in debt and hungry.
I love that as like a rule.
Which really, like, when I have a new group of people sit down at the table, all of a sudden their reason for adventuring is cemented because of the fact that, oh my God, my character is already starving and in debt.
It's so funny that I immediately came to that for the mercenary, that I was like, you made some bad investments. Like that's like a motivating factor. Like he's going to lose his farm or whatever, that sort of like Bill Cuddy sort of thing that I had in my head, sort of like as the adventuring reason post game, because that was like emergent for me. Well, I'm so glad that we got what you were communicating.
Yeah.
And I guess now we have to cut off your head. So this is, you know, we can't get you to shut up.
You
so
got to put it in the sack and turn it over to the townsfolk.
Yeah, we've got several heads at this point now. Yeah, Vella's like, what are you guys doing? We're like, this is just what we do. Just hang on. And we have to go off and make a chair, because this is the moment at which we rank this in the landscape of Grimdark media. So maybe what we'll do is because unfortunately you did say there's not tons of our media on the list that you have interacted with, but we'll put it in our Throne of Skulls. And you give us your sentiments on, if, you know, whatever is above or below
its
it,
relative position.
Relative position you think we got right, or based on the things that you like from our lists. So let's go build. I mean, I guess he can't talk anymore because we did cut his head off. But
could it be the Pillar of Skulls from the altar room? I mean, we've already been to the Pillar of Skulls.
I didn't
today.
need to sit on this today.
Oh, it's a different video, right? Yeah, never mind.
Yeah.
As the light fades and the end draws near, where does this sit upon the Throne of Skulls?
All right, so in Throne of Skulls, we start to rank our favorite things in the Grimdark media landscape. We have 2 screens worth of stuff now, although I still have something that is not on the list, which is World War Z. I did not deign to put World War Z in the landscape of Grimdark media because I thought it was too hopeful. So where are you going to put your number 12 now?
And I will preface this by saying I've actually moved 2 of the things on my previous list that I thought about before. Yeah, I've actually changed something.
You're rearranging some stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'm not going to say what it is, so people can go back and check a previous video and figure it out.
Damn it. That's more editing for me. I can't reuse last video's list.
All right. So my number 12 is, in fact, World War Z.
Yeah, of course it is. All right. So my number 11 then is going to be Rangers of Shadowdeep.
My number 11 is still Last of Us Part 2.
My number 10 is Event Horizon.
10 for me is Astartes.
9 for me is The Book of Eli.
Oh, I forgot you put Book of Eli that low.
I did.
Yeah. 9 for me is House of Hell.
8 for me is House of Hell.
8 for me is Roadside Picnic.
7 for me is Hard Boiled.
7 for me is Book of Eli.
Okay. So then 6 for me is going to be Astartes.
6 for me is Rangers of Shadowdeep.
And number 5 for me is going to be The Precipice of Corruption and Dungeon Crawl Classic.
5 for me is Event Horizon.
Ooh, okay. So then we're going to go to number 4, which is Roadside Picnic.
4 for me was Hard Boiled.
3 is going to be Call of Cthulhu.
I put Precipice of Corruption at number 3.
Nice. Number 2 is going to be The Last of Us Part 2.
Number 2 for me is The Thing.
And number 1 for me is The Thing.
And number 1 for me is Call of Cthulhu, because I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah, I know. That's
all right.
Well, we've still established that. So roughly we're in the same thing. We put this relatively high.
Yeah. It's in the same, I guess, third roughly of the list.
Yeah, top third of the list.
But doing this and putting it on the list was what made me rethink one of my other options, which is why 2 things have swapped places on my list.
Which 2 things have swapped places?
I moved Rangers down. I flipped Rangers and Event Horizon. So Event Horizon moved up 1, and Rangers moved down 1.
I like that. Yeah, I'm with that too.
And I think a big part of it was prepping to run it when I was looking at the visuals, because as I mentioned to you off camera beforehand, I'm rearranging my gaming space right now, and I have a bunch of latchmates sitting around my desk that have all my terrain for Rangers of Shadowdeep in them. And I was looking at my terrain, and I was looking at Nick's art, and I was looking at my terrain, and I was looking at Nick's art, and I'm like, yeah, one of these games is darker than the other.
That's fair. You know what it is for me? It's funny because Rangers has the bleakness, but not the hopelessness, because the Rangers
Yeah, you were talking about how the
themselves-
Rangers themselves.
That's right.
are-
The Rangers themselves are feeling like they can still do something, and they have that noble, bright sort of like feeling to them.
Yeah.
So that was the deciding factor for me. Like, it has it in the setting, but the internal stuff is still very noble, and like they haven't debased themselves to go fight the bad guys.
My trees for Rangers of Shadowdeep do not look like the cover of this adventure
Yeah,
module.
yeah. To be truly grimdark for me, the protagonist can't be a good guy. They can't have any noble intentions either, I don't think. So how'd you feel about that, Nick? How do you feel about where you sit in our current pantheon?
I feel honored to bring so much misery
Yeah, definitely. It was that like it captured for me that survival horror experience that I love. Like, I love survival horror in media, games, movies, books. Like, that to me of this, everything's out to get you. The settings out to get you. Even the people you're working for can't really be trusted. It had a real, like, it's funny how it ended up just turning into The Last of Us, which it literally did when I go back and think about how I played the game. That says something about me psychologically.
Yeah,
too, when I'm
that's
playing the
about you.
protagonist, where I'm like,
You might want to talk to somebody about
I'm
that.
a vengeful god by the end of all of it. Yeah, whoever's left is embittered and vengeful. That does say something about myself. But it definitely came, like, the tone poem you wrote basically for Dungeon Crawl Classic, because they have to share some of this too, I think. Because we're kind of doing like a double header here of like, why is this grimdark? Is so like thoroughly conveyed through this adventure, and the fact that you have people falling off over the course of this, basically to show whoever's left. Sweet. Well, so next week you get a double pick,
Oh, really?
because the patrons are doing game media, and let me tell you, there's a runaway winner right now for game media for March.
Oh, what is it?
Runaway media. It's Mordheim. They are running
Oh, wow.
They are
Okay.
running away with Mordheim, right? Mordheim is like 10 to 15% higher than every other pick right now.
That's interesting.
And there's other ones that have like, they're in like the teens,
Yeah.
but Mordheim is like miles ahead. And that's great, because this year is the 25th anniversary of Mordheim.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because on a tangential note to what we were talking about today, I have a D&D 5e setting, which is it feels like it's very much inspired by Mordheim.
Yeah,
it's
cool.
it's very similar.
Oh, it's auspicious, because they're also Thomas Piernan's working on Trench Crusade right now with Mike Francina, and they've just published their beta test rules for it before the Kickstarter goes live. So like, there's a lot of grimdark stuff happening in the background of that game, so it's a good time to cover it. But because of the order we go in, we've just finished game. It's back to movie. You get a movie pick.
So I'm not doing movie, I'm doing video.
Okay.
We talked about this.
Okay.
I'm going with my all-time favorite representation of grimdark in animation. You know it, you love it. Ukla, we ride.
Oh my God. Okay.
We're doing Thundar the Barbarian.
I can't believe we're doing Hanna-Barbera.
Because nothing is more grimdark than Hanna-Barbera. If you don't believe me, the first evil wizard they encounter is the same voice actor as Fred Flintstone, and that is terrifying.
This is probably going to be one of the most fun for me to edit too, because I'm pretty sure it's all public domain. Because I think the whole thing's on YouTube.
Oh, it might
isn't
be,
it?
yeah.
I think the whole thing's on YouTube. So we can get a lot of like,
The only downside is I'm pretty sure it will be by far the yelliest episode of Grimdark Media. So consider this your warning to turn your volume down before the week after this. Let's put it that way.
God. All right. So that means I have literary pick for the one after that. And then it's going to be, I'll close the poll at the end of February, but right now it's a runaway right now for Mordheim. Mutant Chronicles Warzone was also up there. And something else. There was a video game that was up there pretty high too, but I don't remember exactly what it was. But there's a bunch of Mordheim seems to be running away with it right now. So if you're a patron, if you're on my Patreon, or you just want to have some agency and influence, you can jump on right now and go vote. It'll be open until the end of February as to what we do for game.
Because remember, if you don't have your input, I will keep picking things like Thundar the Barbarian, and it's gonna be that way from here on out.
Thundar the Barbarian. What year is that? 84, 80.
It's because it's either the year before or the year after the D&D cartoon, because I think it got basically that time slot.
Yeah.
So it's either 82 or 84,
Oh
one of
my
those
God.
two, I
Yeah,
think.
this is I don't know how we're gonna.
I'm so excited about this.
The best part is the patrons could just all go watch this, because I'm pretty sure it's all free on YouTube right now, because it's like ancient Hanna-Barbera shit. It's one of the ones I'm surprised hasn't been lampooned by Adult Swim yet.
And
it
you know
feels
what's-
like it's the most open for that.
You know what's
too.
funny? At the start of today's episode, when Nick was talking about the zine culture around DCC, the first zines I ever picked up for DCC were a guy who wrote, I'm probably getting this wrong, Sean Reed Filippo, I think it is, wrote a series called Crawling Under a Broken Moon, which was adapting Thundar the Barbarian for Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Oh my God.
Because two great tastes taste great together.
It's worth noting too. There's also Mutant Crawl Classics, which we should probably mention and maybe do another
We're
episode
getting there.
on.
We're getting
yeah,
there.
because Mutant Crawl Classics is the like Gamma World analog basically
Yeah.
to D&D for this like setting. Sweet. Well, Nick, thank you so much for coming on, man. This was great.
Yes, thank you. It was an honor to be included on this magnificent list.
Yes, well, and also to be the guinea pig for us to do because the first time didn't go well with Zoom, so I'm excited that this will hopefully go better.
And thanks for thanks for throwing out the idea that we got some of the themes and ideas and plot points right, because I'm going to use that to shout down people in the comments section.
That's right. Yeah, we had one of our friends agree with us. We're totally right.
You guys are onto something.
Yeah, I think so. All right, sweet. Well, we'll see you next week, everybody. Have a good one.